The study that we conducted was a study looking at the experiences of students who came to the U.S., most of them before the age of 5, were brought by their parents without legal authorization. And they went through the educational system, and when they're about to graduate from high school, planning for college, because they're college going, they're planning to go to college, they come to discover that they're unable to go to college because they lack legal status, they don't have a social security number, they don't qualify for any type of financial aid. And we estimate that there's at least 13,000 students that are affected by this situation. Most of them are in California, and it's a policy issue. It's an educational policy issue. It's the way that we frame it is it's a loss of talent, because these are students that have invested a tremendous amount of effort and energy to prepare themselves to go to college. Many of them have developed tremendous amounts of leadership skills, academic skills, high levels of civic engagement. They've done everything that you need to do to go to highly selective institutions of higher education, but they can't. It almost seems like an artificial barrier that is there that shouldn't be there. So we wanted to understand the issue more closely. We wanted to understand the complexities of it. So we decided to carry out a study. There are no studies looking at the experiences of these students, particularly how that may result in a loss of talent for American society. So we conducted a study, and this was carried out last year. We spent about 6 months doing the data collection. In the final sample, we surveyed 182 students. Out of those 182, we interviewed 102. And the students came from a variety of different educational levels. A portion of the population was high school students. We also interviewed students who were currently enrolled in college, and they were either enrolled in community college, four-year colleges like the CSU system or the UC system, or some highly selective private universities. And the third group that we interviewed were students that had already gone through college, had graduated, can't put their college degree to work because they're not here legally, they don't have a social security number. So what they did is they decided to continue with their education and enroll in the master's degree program at public institutions of higher education. And so that was the sample. And the themes that we wanted to understand was the challenges that they encounter. We wanted to document the extent of their involvement in American society. So we asked about all kinds of background experiences, leadership experiences, academic awards and recognitions, community service. We asked about their academic course taking, whether they were involved in gifted and talented education, whether they were involved in advanced placement courses, all these different things that would give us a better sense of, what are these students' education experiences like. And then from those data, we hope to create some conclusions and ultimately policy recommendations for politicians at the state level and at the federal level. Across the country, there are various states considering legislation to address that educational issue. Now, there is some legislation that is intended to further limit the educational opportunities of these students. But for the most part, particularly in states where there has been a historical presence of immigrant communities, much of the legislation focuses on supporting these students, that the states recognize that this is a loss, that this is a tragedy, it's a social justice issue. But of course, it's a challenge to gain popular support given public opinion about immigration. Public opinion tends to be negative. It has been negative, particularly after 9/11. And so it's a challenge. And so what we hope to do is to have some evidence, some data that would help politicians, that would help individuals that are working on legislation to support these students, and have that based on the facts as opposed to misinformation, or just people's biases about immigrants. And that's what we've been doing. The data are very rich. They're very telling. The the students that we interview are actually much more impressive than we ever imagined. I mean, we weren't expecting the high levels of achievement, civic engagement, commitment to American society, desire to go into professions that would allow them to come back to the communities and serve. For example, when we ask students about what profession or career they aspired for, many of them said that they wanted to become teachers, professors, doctors, lawyers, but more specifically, they said we want to do those professions and come back to our communities to provide those kinds of services. And I think that's very telling because it's precisely in those communities where there's a lack of professionals in those careers. And here's a talented group of individuals, very capable of going out and having these professions and coming back, but yet they're not able to do that, and we're not able to benefit from that. So that's one of the policy conclusions that we were able to come away with as part of the study. There is a Supreme Court case that was handed down in 1982 called Plyer versus Doe. In that Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court ruled that it is in the compelling interest of the state to educate immigrant youth regardless of their legal status. That in order for them to become contributing members of society, that they had to be educated. That education was a requirement. They're here. We have to facilitate their contribution to American society. So, in that very important decision, a precedent was created. And so across the country, schools, public schools, K through 12 institutions are not allowed to ask students about their legal status. They are supposed to serve any student that comes to their door that needs to be educated, regardless of how they got here. And so that has existed. But what that means is that, as the students go through the educational system, K through 12, we're investing. I mean, as a society, the educational system serves as an investment in future workforce. And it's a significant investment. I mean, a significant budget of every state goes towards education. And so here's a group of students that we've invested into that because we as a society have concluded that we have to do that we should do that legally and morally we're bound to do that. And yet when they finish, when they're ready to go to the next level, which is higher education, and given the changing nature of the economy where it's a minimum requirement to have a college education for a lot of the knowledge-intensive jobs that are being created, that there's a shortage of workers for, that we need to do that. We need to facilitate them continuing to higher education. Well, the Supreme Court case doesn't allow for that because it only speaks to K through 12 education. It says nothing about higher education. So a gap has emerged as a result of that. And so economically, we are investing in a resource that we then, by virtue of not doing anything about it, that we lose out on. It's sort of like throwing money into an issue and not getting that return of that investment. So that policies meant to support these students is really sort of getting that return on that investment. And we're not doing that. The most important thing that we've done from a law policy perspective is that there are several states now that have passed legislation, Texas, California, New Mexico, Oklahoma, New York, for example, have passed legislation, Illinois is another one, have passed legislation to allow undocumented students to pay in-state tuition. Now this, helps a lot because previously